Welcome to Mystic Realms Recap. Please like, share, and subscribe. Enjoy today's episode.
You're the Celestial Empress? Shiro narrowed her eyes warily. Yup. I'll have to say though, Shiro, despite having the possibility to become the next Celestial Empress, you certainly don't act like one. The Empress said as she glanced at Kuromi. Plus, you've brought someone along despite this being a solo trial. I already know about the fact that you're technically the same person, but it's certainly not the best feeling to have my trial turned upside down like this. Oh, let me guess, you wanted me to team up with the humans in the other cities. Shiro joked. Exactly. However, now that you've made an enemy with the royal family, things are going south. Your tutorial has basically ended since you've scared off the last owner of the celestial weapon. Huh? This is the tutorial? Shiro raised her eyebrows. Yup. This is so that you can get a stable footing in this world. I'll admit though, I did edit this trial a little since you went completely against my expectations. The fact that you actually fixed the spear instead of using it as a clue to find me is quite infuriating. Just when I find a person to balance out the equation, you kill her and take her gauntlets. I added 3 other weapons so that you could form alliances to gain their support, but instead you rob 2 and scare off the last one. Do you know how annoying it is to have something you put effort into get destroyed because of someone's whims? The Empress complained as Shiro watched with a blank face. Wait, so you're telling me that this trial is your doing? Kuromi asked. Yeah, Shiro is inheriting my class after all. The Empress nodded her head. Then does that mean you have a connection with the system higher than just being a player? Yes, it does. Staying silent, Kuromi furrowed her brows as she went into deep thought. While Big Sis does her thing, I have a few questions of my own, Shiro said as she sat down on one of the boulders. First, since you're quite chill with having a small chat, I want to know more details about the items that I need for my class up. Are you able to tell me? Shiro asked. Depends on what you want to know. I can give you a rough location of where you can obtain these items. The Empress smiled. However, in return, I want to understand you a bit better. I cannot have someone unqualified to become the Celestial Empress after all. Sure, but do you want to talk here? It's a little open, no? Shiro asked as she glanced at the battlefield behind her. Oh, I can deal with that. The Empress chuckled and snapped her fingers. All of a sudden, everything in the world came to a halt. The birds stopped flying in midair and soldiers were frozen in their place. Only Kuromi, Shiro, and the Empress were unaffected. You stopped time? This is my quest after all. As the admin of this place, I have some privileges. Now for my first question. How did you become Queen of the Spirits? The Empress asked with a serious face. I'll reply to that once you also tell me what I want to know. Shiro smiled. Are you trying to negotiate with me? The Empress raised her eyebrows. Well, perhaps. But it's about this class, so it shouldn't be too hard for you to tip me a few hints now, would it? Shiro said, while keeping her smile. Interesting. In that case, then I'll let you ask first. Where do I find the B-ranked Celestial Catalyst? Shiro asked. You can get that once you finish this trial. My turn. It's the same question I had asked earlier. The Empress replied. You see, I'm not too sure about how my current class came into my hands. I was actually classing up to a different one when I apparently fulfilled a few hidden requirements and got a hidden class. Shiro shrugged. The F***CK? How can you just become the goddamn queen of a race that easily? The Empress widened her eyes in confusion. Don't look at me, asked the system. I already have, and it's not telling me F***CK all. The Empress retorted as she quickly coughed and calmed herself down. Sorry about that. Anyways, what's your next question? She smiled. The hell? Shiro raised her eyebrows after that little outburst, but shrugged it off. However, she knew that this meant the Empress tried to ask the system about her, but for some reason, she couldn't find out anything. Well, my next question is how can I get the Celestial Mana Essence? Shiro asked. That. It's pretty simple as you can probably make it yourself. However, if you're able to complete the trial with a high enough grade, I'll allow you to receive the essence as a completion reward. The Empress replied. Now then, it's my turn again. I dash. Hold on, can I ask you something? Kuromi cut in as the Empress thought about it and nodded her head. Sure. What do you want to ask? What's the system's power over the dungeon and how did you become an admin? From what I know, Shiro was able to retrieve a person from a quest, and the system changed everyone's knowledge about that person since other people had completed the quest before but not to Shiro's standard. In the process, she somewhat made an enemy of the light goddess who tried to disrupt the system but was stopped. How could something that has already happened be changed? And why was the goddess able to affect the system? Kuromi asked as the Empress narrowed her eyes. That's quite an ambitious question, you know. I know, but I feel like Shiro should know about this since things are becoming serious in the outside world. Apparently, queens are coming to our world through portals and creating anchors for some reason. Not only that, the age of demons and gods will arrive soon according to one of the queens. Kuromi replied as the Empress widened her eyes. Wait, what? The age of demons and gods is happening soon. She cried out in shock. Damn, this isn't good. Okay, no more questions. You need to finish this trial quickly since there isn't enough time to find another person to take my class. I'll tell you the next step since you've basically finished the tutorial. Just know that I'll do some edits on my side to make things easier, depending on how you look at it. While the difficulty will increase to Celestial God, you'll be able to finish it in the shortest time possible and reap the most rewards. Not only that, completing one God trial is equal to 3 immortal trials, so one of your requirements will be completed. The Empress explained in a hurry while tapping away. Wait, why are you reacting like this? Kuromi furrowed her brows. Damn. Okay, how do I explain this? Right, the age of demons and gods is an extinction level event for you. Seeing as though you're only level 100 despite the queens already arriving, there's a good chance that your race will be exterminated within the first 2 years. In this new generation, the gods aren't exactly the most benevolent since they need to survive themselves. Hell, rather than age of demons and gods, it's more like a blender with the gods/demons being the blades that shred you apart. The Empress replied. So how do you know about this event, and why is it happening? Shiro asked curiously. I know because I've been through the age of demons and gods already, and I can tell you that it's not fancy. Every garden is given this trial to see if it can become the main home of sorts. Should the garden fail this trial, it'll be eliminated. Once dash. Warning, you are about to exceed the amount of information allowed to give due to your contract and privilege. Should you continue, the system will deem that as you breaking the contract and subsequent punishment will be handed. Reading the notice, the Empress gritted her teeth with annoyance. Crap. Okay, my contract with the system doesn't allow me to say much more, but know this. As you are right now, even if you do complete the trial, there's a good chance for you to be eliminated quickly. You need to get as strong as possible. Your garden is already part of the later batches, and any more failures would be devastating. I've already set up the trial so that the main quest will appear in your system soon. Just go to the location and finish it as soon as possible. I can't kill the person with the armor so that you can have it, but I can hinder him to make things easier for you. The Empress said while swiping at a few holographic screens. Seeing how anxious she was at this, both Shiro and Kuromi knew that things weren't looking good. Rank up trial updated. Tutorial complete. Main quest updated. Clear the corruption. A portal of sorts seemed to have opened up in the center of the capital city. Powerful people started to go missing one after the other as an ominous presence can be felt within the portal. This is the final quest. Anything and everything you do will affect your final score. Looking at the main quest that was updated on her system, Shiro furrowed her brows. Anyways, the person with the celestial armor should be on his way to the capital right as we speak. He'll take a break on the road, and that's when you can steal his armor. True me, since I made things shorter but harder, you'll need all of the celestial weapons to deal with the main enemy. There's not much help I can give other than a single hint in hopes of you fixing the problem of split soul strands. Gateways. The Empress said with a serious face. Gateways. Kuromi raised her eyebrows. Yes, you'll need to keep this in mind if you want to sort your strands out and make them efficient. That way, you can use all 5 of the weapons without draining all of your energy. The Empress nodded. Right then, that's about all I can tell you. I need to do my own thing and get some answers myself, but first, one last question for you, Shiro. Go on. As an Empress, shouldn't you have your underlings help you do things? I know you're getting Kuromi's help, but one person compared to a nation's worth of help is a big difference. The Empress said as Shiro paused for a moment. Well, I don't like relying on other people too much. Unless you have my absolute trust, I won't count on them since the only one you know 100% of is yourself. Shiro replied with a soft smile. But being a ruler is a lonely throne if you keep that thought. The Empress frowned. I don't need a lot of subjects. I already have a few that I trust. Plus, is it also not the role of the ruler to take the burdens on themselves so that the people in their nation don't have to? It's a little cheesy, but it's kind of like Atlas who supports the heaven on his shoulders. In a way, I feel most comfortable when I take the burdens by myself. Shiro shrugged. Of course, that's not to say that I'm entirely benevolent since I wouldn't risk everything for people I don't know. But if it is within my grasp, I still want to try to help them out. In the end, regardless of what you do as a person, people wouldn't care too much other than talking about a few pleasantries. Unless you directly help a person out, they wouldn't feel grateful at heart. It's like seeing a disaster on the other side of the world and a hero managing to solve it without casualties. Sure, you may think, oh, that's nice, but you don't feel too deep of a connection. Hence why it's never worth it in my opinion. Why save others when you can't save yourself? It may be self-sacrifice, but if you're alive, you can save more people. She chuckled as the Empress stood still for a moment. I suppose in one way or another, that's also correct. Just know that there is only so much you can do in the coming age if you take everyone on by yourself. The Empress said before disappearing from her spot. Well then, I suppose we have our next destination, huh? Shiro chuckled before looking over at Kuromi. Amen. Kuromi nodded her head, however she still had quite a few concerns. For now though, they had to focus on quickly completing this trial in order to class up. Regrouping with the rest of the shadow guards, Shiro informed them about a problem in the capital. Explained how the next part of their journey would be dangerous. She warned them about a high chance of death, and if they wanted to back out, they could since she could probably handle it if given some time. Second, young miss, what are you talking about? Have you forgotten that you two and everyone else here is our reason to live? If we let you go alone, then we wouldn't be very good guards now, would we? Philip chuckled as Shiro only smiled. I did warn you about a high chance of death. Since y'all are that ballsy, then you better live okay. She grinned. Leaving the battlefield without caring about the final outcome, they made their way towards the capital city. Kuromi spent this entire time completely focused on drafting up a new spell, so Shiro decided to sit on the roof of the carriage and look up at the sky to pass time. Thinking back to everything that had happened with the system, Shiro couldn't help but feel as though she'd been given a special privilege of sorts. First was the fact that she could retrieve Lysandra from the Light Goddess and have Lysandra's information erased from everyone's memories despite the fact that they had also completed the quest. The second is her dual classing capabilities along with the fact that she had essentially reincarnated twice now, including Kuromi's life. Of course, there was also the chance that she could just be thinking about random things, and this had already happened to other people. If I don't get stronger and level up, there's a good chance for the spirit race to be wiped out, huh? If that happened, Nimue and Azul wouldn't be too happy about this. It would also be quite unfair for them to finally have a queen after centuries of slavery only for them to be wiped out in the next generation. Shiro thought to herself as she sighed. There was also the problem of having humans survive and how the party would react to that. With Kuromi's, or rather, her family living in this world, it would be bad if they were killed as well. I think I need to try making the flying fortress/city again. Right now, I'm only level 100, so the best I can do is probably a flying shack or some sh*T. To make the fortress, I'll need to be around level 300 to 400 after my class up. I should be able to start making larger mechs to hunt now high-level natural monsters on top of heavy weaponry to speed through dungeons for more EXP. She muttered before closing her eyes. After staying in this world for quite a while, she started to miss seeing the faces of her party members. Before I came into this trial, Chunyu and Madison were both level 101. Depending on the flow of time in this place, I might return to see their levels shoot up once more. I do wonder what the others' classes would be though. Lysandra is synced up to me, so she'll class up when I complete this quest, but what about Ian? Questions for later, I suppose. As she continued to think about these questions, she soon fell into a light slumber. ####. Dismissing her avatar, the Empress arrived back in her own void of sorts and brought up the system. Requesting information on the current garden, she called out, "Access denied. As the Celestial Empress of a previous garden, you are not allowed to interfere with the progress of the current garden. I just want to know what's happening out there. Shouldn't there still be a few decades left until the age of demons and gods?" Why is it so soon? She called out once more. Access denied. Your privilege level is not high enough for you to know about that information. Then what the hell can I know? This is the last garden before reset. Seeing the message, the Empress' heart sunk in shock since this shouldn't be the case. Even if the current world fails the test of the next generation, this shouldn't be the last garden. There should still be a few others left. No, that's impossible. System, there should still be several gardens left after this, right? Where did they go? Negative. There are no more gardens as this is the only remaining garden. Taking a deep breath, the Empress gritted her teeth and decided to go beyond her privileges. Once she does this, her contract would be broken and she'll be erased, but it no longer matters since this was the last garden. Once this fails, she'd be erased anyways, so she might as well use her life to boost up the chances of success. You better not fail me, Shiro, she said as she furiously tapped away at the system. After sleeping for a short while, Shiro felt incredibly refreshed as she yawned and rubbed her eyes. Looking around her, she saw that it was around late afternoon. The sun was going to set soon, and they were about to set up a camp. Well, that was quite satisfying. Let's see. Big sis, any progress? Shiro asked as she leaned over the edge of the roof and looked into the carriage. Seeing Shiro pop her head out from above the carriage, Kuromi only chuckled and poked her forehead. Yes, I have. For my lil sis who's been sleeping soundlessly above the carriage, I have finalized the spell for you. Well, I say finalized, but it's still a prototype of sorts. However, it's much better than the spell that we have. I'll need to do something from my end, though. Oh, and what's that? Shiro tilted her head curiously. It's a bit embarrassing to say, so come in here, and I'll tell you. Kuromi said while glancing at the shadow guards. Nodding her head, Shiro flipped herself into the carriage. So what do you need to do? Shiro asked. I need you to take your dress off and expose your back to me. I'll be flushing my energy through your body in order to create the gateways, Kuromi said as Shiro paused for a moment and nodded her head. Sure, that's fine. But do I need to take off the entire dress, or can I just pull it down a little? Shiro asked with a slight blush since taking off her dress would make her feel like an exhibitionist, and that was not what she wanted to be. Oh, of course, but your entire back needs to be exposed, Kuromi replied as Shiro nodded. Looking around, she flicked her wrist and encased the entire inner area with a shadow so that no one could see what was happening inside. Pulling down the top of her dress, she kept it around her waist as she exposed her naked back to Kuromi. Now that I look at it, my physical body is quite alluring, huh? Despite not seeing anything too revealing, this is quite provoking. Kuromi raised her eyebrows as Shiro's smile twitched. Big sis, can you do what you need to do before I put my dress back on? Shiro asked. Sure. Right then, Kuromi chuckled as she pressed her hands against Shiro's back. Closing her eyes, she started to funnel her energy through Shiro's body. Since they each had one half of the soul strand, this process was quite easy since it was akin to moving energy around in your own body. Furrowing her brows, Shiro felt a little strange from the changes, but said nothing and allowed Kuromi to finish. After a short while, Shiro could feel Kuromi remove her hand from her back and sighed out in relief. All right, it should be done now. Get dressed and give your energy a try. Kuromi smiled as Shiro nodded her head. Once she was fully dressed, she deactivated the shadow and immediately noticed the change to her energy. Wait, isn't this like mana links? Shiro asked as she widened her eyes. Yup, I used mana links as a reference when designing the gateways. Paired with the spell that our father had left us, I managed to make it so that the energy doesn't go through our soul strand, but instead a separate path. Kuromi said with a grin. Of course, your reservoir has not changed, so you are still restricted in terms of the total amount of energy you have, but you should find out that you can fight for longer without too much worry. I see. What? You did it to yourself? Shiro asked as Kuromi shook her head. It's a two-person job, lil sis. Unless you want me to explain the entire process to you, I'm fine with how I am right now. I don't need to fight as much as you do. Kuromi smiled. Well, I still want you to protect yourself if something happens, so this is beneficial to you. Plus, you can assist me when we fight the corruption, Shiro suggested. Hearing her suggestion, Kuromi thought for a bit before nodding her head. All right, in that case then this is what I did. Listening to Kuromi's explanation of the process, Shiro found that it was relatively simple and it was just a matter of finding out the process first. Activating her shadows once more, she watched as Kuromi took off her dress and pushed her hair aside. Just as she was about to help Kuromi create a few gateways, Shiro had an idea as she had a grin on her face. Activating her ice element, Shiro pressed her palms against Kuromi's unguarded back. HY. Crying out in shock, Kuromi almost jumped off her chair since she did not expect two cold palms to come into contact with her back. Ahaha. Big sis, I didn't know that you could make a cute sound like hiya. Shiro laughed as Kuromi blushed. Anyways, I'll be serious now, she said after calming down. Placing her hands on Kuromi's back properly this time, Shiro started to construct the gates. After a short while, she finished adding the gates and let Kuromi get dressed. Right then, now that's sorted, I think we're going to be setting up a camp soon. The sun is setting and we need to start preparing some dinner, Kuromi said while glancing out of the carriage. Oh, before that, where do you think the last person with the weapon is? The Empress did say that she'll make it easier for us to find him. Something along the lines of taking a break on the road so that it's easier for us to borrow his armor. She did say that, but we haven't seen or sensed anyone that could fit the bill right now, so I guess we can only wait to see what happens. Kuromi shrugged before getting off the carriage. Going around the back, she brought out a few utensils so that she could cook. Shiro only smiled as she followed behind her. The night passed safely as they made sure to get a few guards on night duty in case of ambush. Waking up early in the morning, they resumed their journey to the capital. However, in the distance, they could see ominous dark skies that were tainted in red. The sun could no longer be seen anymore due to the numerous clouds. Wait, isn't that just peachy? Shiro said as Kuromi nodded her head with a frown. If this is the result of one person/monster, I'd say they're probably more powerful than you in the outside world since they can affect the surroundings with their presence alone. You're not at full fighting capability either since a lot of your weapons and skills are unusable right now. Well, I guess it's better than hearing about literal Ragnarok happening in our world. Shiro joked, but Kuromi could tell that she was quite serious. Before she could reply, they saw a few flying figures swooping towards them. Careful! Ambush! Shiro called out as she flicked her hand and sent out 5 bolts of lightning. During this, the celestial jewel glowed softly, reducing the energy needed to send these bolts out. *KRSH. Seeing the lightning strike against the figures and splitting them in half, Shiro was rather surprised at their effectiveness. Was that meant to happen? She asked in slight confusion since that was meant to be a warning shot. Kuromi didn't say anything other than going up to where the corpses of the figures had fallen so that she could examine it. Once she was at the spot, she couldn't help but frown in disgust. The corpse was this weird mishmash of beast parts that seemed to be strung together haphazardly. As for its condition, it was already decaying quite a bit, so Kuromi knew that the host had been dead for quite a while, hence why it was so easy for Shiro to kill it with a warning shot. From the center of the corpse, she could see a parasite of sorts that was mutating more of the body parts as bestial claws seemed to form from the separated flesh. Immediately freezing the corpse and shattering it into dust, Kuromi made sure that she didn't inhale anything in case the parasite infected her. Looking around, she could see that the ground was drained of life as there were no signs of fresh greenery. Only decay and emptiness could be seen. Seems like this is the corruption, huh? Shiro said while stepping off the carriage. Seems like it. Kuromi nodded her head as she had a serious expression on her face. From where we are, there's still roughly another day till we arrive in the capital. If the so-called corruption has spread this far and the monsters are already attacking, I don't exactly want to imagine what it's like in the capital city. Kuromi said while shaking her head. Do you want to slow down our pace a little? If we rush in, we could be surrounded by monsters, Shiro suggested. Nodding her head, Kuromi agreed with Shiro's decision and informed Philip of their choice. Understood, young miss, he replied. Getting back into the carriage, Kuromi wondered if they should bring a form of protection. If I had some equipment, I could have spent a bit of time to analyze what had happened to that person. Unfortunately, I don't, so I have to make do for now. If anything, getting some masks might be helpful. There's also the problem of perhaps inhaling the parasite during combat. Kuromi thought to herself with a frown. Are you okay? Shiro asked, seeing Kuromi's frown. Yeah, I am. Just wondering about how we should go about the fight. I'm not keen on the whole parasite in the body thing we just saw. We can fight in our masks, but there is still a chance that we could be infected by the parasite. Kuromi replied as Shiro nodded her head. I see, you're worried about that. I've had to deal with quite a few diseases in Arya, so I got a few countermeasures. Of course, that's with my Nanomancer class, which I can't access right now. If anything, the best thing we can probably do right now is to burn the entire battlefield at the start in order to get rid of the parasites. We can also freeze the entire place so that the difference in temperature causes some damage. Shiro suggested. That could work, but I'm not too sure about how much energy we'll have left once we do that. If we start the fight with less than half, then you know it's going to be a failed attempt. Kuromi frowned. True. I mean, there are a few fire and ice users in the Shadow Guards. Perhaps we can get them to do it for us. We could, but at the same time, I want them to still have a way to protect themselves. However, and this is a big however, we are short on time and I don't think we'll see them again after this trial. Kuromi sighed as she wasn't one to enjoy seeing others sacrifice themselves for her. Staying silent, Shiro looked down on her hands since she wasn't too comfortable with this idea. Before she could respond, they felt the carriage stop. First young miss, second young miss. There seems to be a fight not too far from us. It's between a man and a few monsters that are quite large in size. Philip called out. Let's check it out. Shiro suggested as she grabbed a mask for safety purposes. Climbing onto the roof, she looked out into the distance and saw an armored man fighting against 3 mutated beasts. The beasts were these horrifying, grotesque monsters that had skin peeling off the surface and armor embedded into their body. Any resemblance of their previous form was lost as different animal parts could also be seen protruding from their backs and heads. As for the man, he had short black hair and black eyes. His complexion was rather pale as blood seeped down the corner of his lips. Despite the lack of damage on his armor, Shiro could tell that this man was not in a good shape. Seeing the new arrivals from the corner of his peripherals, hope seemed to ignite in his eyes. Help! Can you help me, please? He shouted out while dodging one of the monster's punches. Should we? Shiro asked since she could guess that this was the person with the celestial armor. Maybe we should watch for a bit and see what the monsters do. Kuromi replied since it was a good chance to get some information. They needed to get the armor from the person anyway. It doesn't matter if he's dead or alive. Please help. I know you're collecting the celestial weapons, right? I'll give you mine if you help. He called out once more in hopes of getting their support. Kind of feel like we're mercenaries being offered a contract. Shiro smiled. Indeed. In that case, then let's go. We'll finish this quickly, but make sure you conserve your energy. Since the celestial weapons take a bunch of energy, we can test to see if fire and ice will work on them. Kuromi suggested as Shiro nodded her head. Activating her celestial raiment, she tuned it to her underworld fire attunement. Snapping her fingers, a flickering orb of fire appeared on her fingertips as she sent it hurling towards the monster. Asterisk, boom. Exploding into a ball of flames that pushed the man back by a few steps. Shiro saw that there were a few burns on the surface, but nothing too major. Big sis. It looks like they have a resistance to fire. Shiro called out as Kuromi nodded. In that case, let me give ice a try. Kuromi replied. Couching down slightly, she dashed towards the beasts as cold mist flowed out of her palms. Pivoting on her right leg, she swiped her arm around her as a swarm of ice sharps appeared and stabbed into the beasts. Activating her spell, the shards exploded themselves, freezing the monster from the inside. Once the monsters were immobilized, she reinforced her body with celestial energy and slammed her palm against the frozen body of the beast. Asterisk crack. Large cracks could be seen spreading out on the surface as black blood oozed from the gaps. Quickly backing off so that the blood doesn't get on her, Kuromi glanced toward Shiro and saw that she had already changed her element to ice. Welp, seems like ice is the way to go. Shiro grinned as cold mist swirled around her. Stomping down, 3 large magic circles appeared under the monsters as ice erupted out and skewered their bodies, suspending them in the air. Clenching her hand into a fist, spikes exploded out from the monsters' bodies as they were split into pieces which scattered around. Damn, attack really is your forte, huh? Kuromi raised her eyebrows since she was able to kill all 3 monsters in a short period of time. Yup, in a fight, going direct is the best way. Shiro grinned before jumping off the carriage. Walking towards the man, she was about to ask him for the armor when he threw down a flashbang of sorts. Quickly shielding her eyes, she could sense that he was trying to run away as she attached an orb to his body. Asterisk sigh. I didn't want to kill him, but here we are. Shiro muttered as he had disappeared from her view once the flash of light died down. Shaking her head, she snapped her fingers as the man appeared in front of her once more due to the orb she had placed on him. Widening his eyes, dread filled his mind. Before he could even beg for mercy, Shiro jammed her hand into his mouth. Sending fire down his throat, she started to cook him alive before ripping off his head and throwing it aside. With the user dead, the armor retracted itself into a marking that tattooed itself on his collarbone. Placing her finger on the collarbone, Shiro could feel a burning sensation much like what had happened with the gauntlets and walked back to the carriage. Do you want to destroy the body completely or just leave it here? Kuromi asked. Let's just leave it here. We need to get to the capital before this gets worse. After all, in due time, it could be lethal to even breathe near this place. Shiro replied as Kuromi nodded her head. Giving everyone a mask before entering the carriage, they started to make their way to the capital. On their way there, they were ambushed by a few more monsters that were easily dealt with. For the shadow guards, it pained them a little to see the grand capital be reduced to this lifeless area that could only be described as hell. Capital of the dead. Setting up a camp up in the nearby hills of the capital, Shiro looked at the city through her orbs and couldn't help but furrow her brows. As if it was a zombie apocalypse, all of the residents in the city have been turned into these monstrosities that roamed the streets. The once bustling city was now quiet as the only sound they could hear was the occasional grunting from the monsters. Located in the center of the city was a nest of sorts as there were hundreds upon thousands of tunnel entrances that lead deep underground. Unfortunately for them, it seemed like the boss was located deep underground. So, how should we approach this? Shiro asked while glancing towards Kuromi. I'd say we want to clear out a portion of the city first, or else we might be surrounded should the boss call for them when we're fighting. However, if we did that, it'll take us several days to weeks for us to actually kill most of the monsters in the city. Kuromi frowned. Stealth is risky as well since we don't know where to look in order to find the boss. Shiro sighed. No wonder the Empress wanted us to make allies. Going through all of this alone would be quite tough, especially since I don't have access to most of my skills. If I could use my Snowmancer class, I would have just bombed the entire city to the ground. She thought to herself. Shaking her head, she got rid of the thoughts before taking a closer look at the city. Do you think it's possible for us to flush the boss out instead of going in? She asked as she glanced at all the tunnels. Oh, that could work, but the amount of energy needed for that would be ridiculous. Kuromi replied. Indeed, rather than flooding the entire tunnel system, I was thinking that maybe we should just remove the top. It's kind of like taking the roof off a house. Shiro smiled. How do you plan on doing that? Remember the spell that the dragon and giant used in that fight? I still have the composition of it in my mind. If we make some edits, we'll be able to get some of the shadow guards to help construct that spell so that we can destroy the roof of that base. The scale would be smaller, but it should be enough for what I want to do. Shiro explained. All right, let's do that. We're short on manpower anyways, so this is probably the best choice. We drag the boss out and fight in our turf. Kuromi smiled as she brought out her notebook. So, how do you think we should go about modifying a one-person spell into one that requires multiple people? Shiro asked. The same way we use our energy now, using gateways. Each person here would act as a gateway, funneling energy into a main, who would then construct the spell. Kuromi replied while drafting up a few prototypes for this method. Oh, who's going to be the main then? Shiro asked. I am. You sit out for this one since we'll be needing your full power in the actual boss fight. If anything, can you draw down the magic circle in this notebook so that I can memorize it? Kuromi replied. Handing Shiro a spare notebook, Kuromi walked over to the shadow guards and explained the situation. As Kuromi was explaining the situation, Shiro started to draw a magic circle. Seeing that the complexity was more than what a single page could contain, Shiro ripped out a few pages and connected them together. Once she finished the drawing, she laid it out on the ground. Right then, The main thing about this magic circle is these two sections. If you mess these two up, the spell will not activate. The section on the left is for directions, while the one on the right is amplification. You'll need to also keep these two in mind, especially the amplification section. Shiro said as she pointed at each of the spots. Yo, I see. Alright, I've pretty much got a rough understanding of it now. The only concern I have is whether or not our practice would attract any attention since the surge of energy might be quite obvious. Kuromi furrowed her brows. Don't worry about that. I'll protect you lot while you do this. I'll be using the spear and shield in their base form to fight off the enemy, so I won't be using up my energy. Shiro smiled before bringing out the weapons. Even without funneling energy into them, they were still amazing weapons that were far above the average standard. Okay, just remember that you should avoid coming into contact with their blood if possible. We still don't know what's causing their infection. If things get a bit dangerous, don't hesitate to use the celestial armor. Kuromi warned as Shiro nodded her head. During the days of travel towards the capital, they had somewhat got an understanding of what each of the weapons do. The spear could be charged to produce one extremely powerful throw, while the shield could save your life 3 times every 3 days. As for the armor, all she could find out right now was that it could massively bolster her defense and resistances. The more energy she funnels into them, the stronger it becomes. With the jewel also in her possession, each spell would require less energy, so she could fight without worrying too much if *T hit the fan. Grabbing one of the spare outfits in the carriage, she changed into one that covered most of her body so that she could avoid direct contact with the fluid. Alright, I'll keep the battle a little further from this place so that the bloodshed wouldn't affect you all just in case the parasite is airborne. Shiro smiled as Kuromi nodded her head. Making a few more preparations, Kuromi had every guard stand in a specific location. Right then, this should be correct. Is everyone ready? Kuromi asked as the guards nodded their heads. Smiling at their response, she stomped down as a faint tether could be seen, connecting the guards to each other. As this was happening, the surge of celestial energy seemed to have attracted the monsters in the surroundings since they all looked towards them at the same time. That's rather creepy. Shiro joked as she watched the monsters come closer. Once they were within 200 meters away from them, she leapt into a sprint and readied her spear. Twisting her body, she threw the spear towards the closest monster, sinking the spear tip deep into its body. Grabbing the pommel of the spear, Shiro pushed it down before stomping it with her foot. Splitting the monster in half, she quickly raised up her shield and pushed the blood aside. Glancing around her, she saw that there were 2 monsters trying to flank her from both sides. Quickly ducking down, Shiro grabbed the spear and spun it in a circle around her, slicing the legs of the monsters and forced them to fall over. Slamming her shield against the monster's head, she crushed it as if it was an empty can before backing off. In a single exchange, she was able to kill 2 monsters and incapacitate the other. However, there were still plenty of them charging towards her. Thankfully, there weren't any monsters behind the guards, so she only had to worry about one direction. I suppose this is good practice for when I go against people who cancel out mana. She mused to herself as she readied her spear once more. Grinning with battle intent, she dashed towards the horde. As she continued to kill the enemies, Kuromi's spell neared completion as the array could be seen floating above the capital. At this point, all of the monsters had been aggroed to their location as Shiro was fighting with everything she got so that they would not disrupt the spell. During this, she was forced to use a few spells since she would not have caught the monsters that rushed past her otherwise. But with this, Kuromi was able to charge her spell without any problems. After a few moments, the magic circle floating above the capital solidified as intense heat could be felt even from this far out. Without a second word, Kuromi activated the spell as a blinding pillar of fire descended onto the capital. Snowmancer reborn. I've become a snow girl. Seeing the pillar of fire crash down into their new home, the monsters roared out in panic as they quickly retreated. Huh. Damn, about time they left this queen alone. There's only so much focus I can give to you people. Shiro joked as she was breathing rather hard since fighting out a whole horde by herself while protecting an objective wasn't the easiest task to do. Looking towards the nest, Shiro was rather surprised to see the monsters jump into the fire without hesitation. Amen? Are they trying to reduce the impact of the attack? She muttered in confusion as they were layering themselves over what used to be the roof. However, the power of the spell was too much for them, so instead of leaving behind a corpse, only ash remained. Yura. Hearing a thunderous cry, Shiro narrowed her eyes towards the nest. There was a big chance that whoever cried out just now was the boss. Krrrr. Feeling the ground shake as if it was an earthquake, Shiro quickly stabilized her footing. Bang. Erupting out from the nest was a giant pillar of flesh that had an assortment of limbs, armor, and other objects sticking out of its body. It was as if God had just rolled up a piece of glue into the shape of a worm and just threw it in the trash. Black blood and bones could be seen through a few of the gaps, but most of it was just flesh and objects. Looking towards the head of the monster, she could see 4 splits that reached down his body rather than a single mouth. Within those splits, waves upon waves of moving monsters could be seen, writhing around. From afar, it almost looked like a huge nest of maggots. While it had no eyes, it seemed like it could sense the area around it perfectly since it locked onto her immediately upon exiting the next. Main quest updated. Defeat the corruption/parasitic harvester. Glancing at the updated main quest, Shiro thought for a moment before charging up her spear. Let's test this guy's defense, she thought to herself. As the flames on the spear increased, Shiro narrowed her eyes and threw the spear towards the harvester. Boom. Releasing a pulse of fire to increase its speed, the spear slammed against the harvester's body, causing a small tidal wave of corpses to fall out from the splits. Frowning slightly, Shiro saw that there were only a few faint scorch marks from the fire, but other than that, it seemed like the harvester was quite resistant to physical-based attacks. Aobnus. Yura. Roaring out in rage, the harvester charged towards her as it slithered across the ground, leaving behind a trail of corpses. Quickly activating her celestial raiment, Shiro switched her element to forest and slammed her hands down. Tree roots started to erupt out from the ground as it tried to bind the harvester down. Unfortunately for her, the harvester didn't seem fazed by this attempt as it easily shrugged off the bindings. Seeing this giant worm-like creature come closer, it was only now that Shiro truly understood how big this being was. Despite coming this far out from the capital, she still couldn't see the end of its body as it was still connected to the nest. Jumping up into the air, she aggroed it a little further away from Kuromi and the guard since they were currently recovering from using such a big spell. Switching her element to Void Star, she created 3 orbs and threw it towards the mouth/splits in its body. Bang bang bang. Exploding upon impact, Shiro saw that Void Star was able to deal more damage compared to her spear throw. Seems like he's weaker to magic damage. If I only relied on the celestial weapons, this would have been an impossible fight. But now that I know he's weak to magic, I should be able to kill him quickly, Shiro thought with a smile. However, as she was thinking about this, the harvester shot out a torrent of green and black liquid towards her. Feeling danger overwhelm her senses, Shiro quickly jumped into a portal in order to dodge. Reappearing not too far from her previous spot, she glanced back to see the ground melt away upon contact with the liquid. TCH, that's going to be annoying, she muttered with a frown. Switching her element to cosmic ice, cold mist started to surround her. Snapping her fingers, a blizzard formed near the harvester as ice could be seen spreading across the surface of its body. But before she could fully activate her spell, several black tongues shot out of the harvester's body and tried to skewer Shiro. Quickly dodging a few of them, one of them managed to come close to hitting her, but she parried it with her shield. But despite her success in parrying the attack, the force of the impact still caused her bones to creak as they bordered on the threshold of breaking. Gritting her teeth, she grabbed her spear and enhanced her strength with celestial energy. No more fooling around, since the longer this goes on for, the worse it'll get for me. Now that I know it's weak to magic, I just need to bombard it, she thought to herself as she switched back to her Nitri mindset. Entering a state of full focus, she swiped at one of the tongues. She managed to cut it off as black blood tried to get on her body. Flicking her element to fire in an instant, evaporated the blood away before it could come into contact and used boreal wind to disperse the gas so that she didn't breathe it in. Flying higher into the sky, she flicked her element once more as she gathered lightning between her palms, creating a giant lightning spear much like the one she used to attack the dragon. She swiped her hand down and sent it towards the harvester. Asterisk bang. Crackling against the harvester's body, the skin started to boil and peel off while it tried to attack her with its tongues once more. Changing her element back to ice, she released a pulse of ice mist that started to slow the tongues down before freezing them. Break, Shiro said coldly as she switched her element to Stygian steel and had metal constructs slam against the frozen tongues, breaking them into pieces. As Shiro was juggling between elements in order to fight the harvester, Kuromi had recovered from using her spell and was watching the fight from a distance. Despite them technically being the same person, Kuromi couldn't help but watch in awe as Shiro commanded the elements to go against this monstrosity. In her current state, she was able to accurately judge which elements she needed in order to deal the most amount of damage in that one moment and which ones could help her avoid an attack. She's setting up for opportunities of attack through countering with her elements. Kuromi smiled since Shiro was finally showing her talent as a mage. In her previous life, despite being a Tier 6 legend, she had always used her firearms and never focused on magic. However, now that she had a thorough understanding of how her elements work and when she should use them, her diversity had increased by another level. Regardless of what type of enemies she faces, whether they be resistant to physical-based attacks or magic, she could deal with them alone. If she could not do that, she would only be taken as a joke if she said she wanted to take the burden on by herself. Right then, with my little sister risking her life right now, what do you suppose we should do? Kuromi said as she glanced back at the guards. We help, the guards replied in sync. Correct. Now hit that disgusting worm with everything you got. Kuromi grinned as she dashed towards the battlefield. Stomping down, she created a pillar of ice and launched her into the air as she took a page out of Shiro's book and created an ice spear. Twisting her body, she threw the spear towards the harvester's body. Asterisk bang. Piercing the body, the spear exploded into an ice rose as vines spread out and pinned it to the ground. With the harvester now pinned for a short moment, they could bombard it with everything they got. Time passed slowly as Shiro continued to draw the harvester's aggro, allowing the guards and Kuromi to damage it as much as they could. However, despite all of their efforts and the amount of wounds the harvester had sustained, it didn't seem to be feeling anything since it still attacked with the ferocity it had at the start. At this point, Shiro could feel that her energy was roughly around the 20% mark. Damn, this isn't too good. This F***'s not dying despite his weakness to magic, she mused to herself while furrowing her brows. Quickly dodging another one of the harvester's attacks, she glanced towards Kuromi. Big sis, you got an idea on how to kill this thing? We're not exactly making progress. Shiro called out as Kuromi frowned. Looking around them, she noticed that the harvester was still connected to the nest and hadn't left during this entire fight. Not only that, it seemed to want them to fight it as far away as possible. Shiro, the nest, Kuromi shouted out as Shiro immediately snapped her attention towards the nest. Noticing the same thing that Kuromi did, she nodded her head and started to dash towards it. Thankfully, the number of monsters in the city had thinned out a little during their fight, since her spells would destroy them upon impact. However, despite this fact, she still had to be careful since she could be infected. Asterisk Yura. Seeing that Shiro was now charging towards the nest, the harvester roared out in anger as every monster tried to stop her. Ignoring the damage inflicted onto him by Kuromi and the guards, the harvester attempted to attack Shiro in hopes of getting her to stay away from the nest. Unfortunately for him, Shiro was prepared for an attack from the back. Flicking her arm, a giant ice block dropped out from the portal as it slammed into the top of the harvester's head, pushing it against the ground. This gave her enough time to reach the entrance of the nest as she quickly dodged the monster's attack. Some of the black blood almost landed on her body as she quickly dodged to the side since it was risky for her to come into contact with the liquid. Switching to her fire element, she burned the monsters to ash before looking back at Kuromi. Giving Shiro a thumbs up, telling her to leave everything here to them, Kuromi grinned before attacking the harvester with her ice. Seeing this, Shiro nodded her head and dived into the nest. Upon entry, she immediately frowned in disgust as the atmosphere was damp, humid, and stunk of rotting flesh. Every time she stepped down with her foot, it would produce this wet, splurging sound as if she was wringing the water from a towel. Pushing down her feeling of disgust, she quickly made her way deeper into the nest using the harvester's body as a guide. There were moments where black tongues would suddenly appear from the body and try to attack her, but she would parry them with her shield before slashing them apart. As she ventured deeper, she could see a hint of light through the gaps. Hidden boss discovered. Parasitic harvester's true core. True core? Hidden boss. Does that mean the harvester could be beat normally with a large army, and this is just an additional stage? Shiro thought to herself before peering into the room. Connected to the harvester's external body was this fleshy egg sac that would pulse occasionally. The surface of the egg was quite thin as she could see inside, which revealed the silhouette of a long serpent-like being that would swim around in the egg. Not only that, but the walls of this chamber seemed to be made from flesh that had black blood oozing out onto the floor, which formed a runic pattern that surrounded the egg. Corpses could be seen submerged into the wall with expressions of fear and disbelief. Charming. Anyways, no time to waste. Shiro muttered as she readied her spear. Flooding it with celestial energy, she was about to throw it towards the egg sac when it was ripped open from the inside, causing black mist to explode out of the egg and spread through the room. Furrowing her brows, she immediately switched her element to wind and swept the mist aside. After all, for all she knows, inhaling that mist once could mean death for her. Glancing towards the now ripped open egg, she quickly dashed towards it in order to deal as much damage. After all, it was completely unguarded right now. The egg had just opened, leaving the main body open for an attack. She would be stupid not to attack it since it was akin to waiting for someone to finish transforming. Twisting her body, she threw the spear towards the opening as flames erupted out from the spear tip. Asterisk, boom. Piercing the egg sac and sending parts of it scattering through the room, the spear then embedded itself deep into the walls. Looking towards the broken egg, Shiro could see a figure with a hole through its body. Glaring at her with anger, armor started to form around it, but blood continued to flow out of the hole that she had punctured. Seems like I've hit the jackpot. She smiled to herself since this was a good sign. Even if its defenses are massively bolstered by their armor, as long as this hole remains, she'll have a target to attack. Summoning the spear back to her side, Shiro made sure that the blood was flicked off the spear before looking back at the enemy. The main body was that of a muscular human with gray skin and neon blue tattoos filled with energy. Its right arm was in actuality the head of a serpent/dragon that seemed to have a mind of its own. Taking the initiative in the fight, she flickered in front of the beast as she stabbed her spear towards the hole that she had previously opened up. Just before her spear landed the hit, the dragon arm appeared in her vision with its mouth wide open. Breathing out a torrent of black mist, the head forced Shiro to take a few steps back to avoid this. Not giving her a chance to reorientate herself, the true harvester dashed towards her and slammed its arms down. Asterisk, bang. Crashing against the fleshy floor of the room, rotting arms suddenly erupted out from the ground and tried to grab Shiro by the legs. Clicking her tongue, she quickly jumped up into the air and released a wave of cold mist to freeze everything that tried to grab her. Rather rude to grab a lady by the legs, don't you think? Shiro frowned while flicking her fingers up. In a similar fashion to the rotting arms, tree roots wrapped around the serpent arm. Flickering just above the arm, she twisted her body and slammed the spear against the arm. Seeing that it only managed to sink in by a few centimeters, Shiro frowned before slamming her heel down on the spear to drive it down with greater force. Before the spear could completely separate the arm from the body, the muscles writhed and contracted around the spear tip, firmly lodging it into the flesh as Shiro had no way of pulling it out despite her greatest efforts. Furrowing her brows, she quickly cut her losses and jumped back while using the arm as a platform. Seeing the blood ooze onto the spear tip and the harvester grabbing the spear out before handling it as if it was its own weapon, Shiro narrowed her eyes in seriousness. Now that the harvester had her spear, it had effectively cut off her main source of physical damage. While her gauntlet could break most defenses, it was still lacking in attack power when compared to her spear. The worst part was that she couldn't even teleport it back to her hands since the harvester was keeping such a tight grip over the weapon. If she tried, she'd have to drag his body along, or else it would not work. Taking a deep breath, she calmed herself down as she raised her shield. Since the harvester had her weapon, she'd stick to short, burst-type magic in order to force it to release her spear. With a prime target such as the hole that she had created in its guts, it shouldn't be too hard of a task to accomplish. Parrying the spear thrust along with other physical attacks, Shiro tried to slam her fist against the harvester's armor, but it seemed like it was prepared. Every time she tried to go in for an attack, it would back off and counter with her spear. Strangely enough, it was almost as if it was learning from her attacking style, since she could sense some similarities. If that really is the case, then the longer this fight goes on, the harder it will be. I need to finish it quickly. Shiro frowned. After all, if the harvester could really learn her attacking style, there was a high chance for it to find her weaknesses. However, there was also a strategy she could employ in order to win the fight, and that was to force the harvester to lower its guard. By allowing a few hits and making it seem like it has learnt her entire move set, she'll be able to surprise it once it gets conceded. Continuing her struggle against the harvester, she allowed herself to fail at parrying its attacks a few times as she was forced back against the wall. Stabbing her shield into the wall, she used it as a foothold to vault herself over the harvester. Before it could collect the shield, she teleported it back into her hands since it would be bad if it also got her shield along with the spear. Seeing Shiro struggle and back off for quite a while now, the harvester seemed to be enjoying the situation as the serpent head had a sneer on its face. What it didn't know was that despite taking a few hits, she had not activated her celestial armor, nor did she use her celestial raiment at full force. She could estimate that this harvester could see their fight against the fake one outside and knew what she could do. In that case, then the best way to go about it was reduce her energy usage, so it seemed like she was out of energy. While the reality of the situation wasn't too far off, once there was an opportunity, she could slam the harvester with a burst of power. Just as she was about to try to attack the harvester once more, she could see it using the spear as a toothpick of sorts as it was taunting her. Poochie. Feeling as though a vein had just burst, Shiro took a moment to calm herself since the boss was smart. Even though it was taunting her, it wasn't conceded yet. The moment she rushed in, he'd attack back at full force. She needed some more time so that the harvester thought she was desperate and out of ideas. Thinking about it for a moment, she had an idea as she blatantly glanced at the hole that she had made earlier and narrowed her eyes. Seeing this, the harvester knew that Shiro wanted to attack its only weakness at this point and made sure to guard it well. Continuing the struggle, Shiro acted as though she was very tired. Her attacks were slow and her breathing was rough. Her footwork was all over the place as there were times where she would just so happen to dodge an attack or two. Of course, this was all an act to lure the harvester in, but the monster didn't know about that. Shiro had continued this act for around 10 to 15 minutes now, as she had forced herself to sustain a bit of damage in order to bait the harvester in. Just as she was about to go for another attack, she tripped on her foot and fell over. Quickly rolling off the side, she tried to crawl away from the harvester. Acting as though she was in despair, her eyes seemed desperate, but her mind was working its best to find the perfect moment. Due to her fall, her mask moved out of place, making it so that the harvester could see her face filled with desperation and despair. Seeing the face of a maiden in a panic, a sadistic intent seemed to ignite in the harvester's heart as it chuckled and used the spear to cut other parts of her clothes. Naturally, this action pissed Shiro off, but she had to endure it a little and allowed it to cut the parts of her clothes that wouldn't show any too important. Only things like the arm or the belly, but never near her chest or waist area. Thankfully, her patience seemed to pay off as the harvester was clearly enjoying the situation and let its guard down under the assumption that Shiro couldn't fight back anymore. There was a reason that people told others not to play with their food/prey since they could still fight back with their lives on the line. But since the harvester was clearly born just now, it wouldn't know that. At this point, all it knows is that it's powerful and unbeatable. Understanding the situation and harvester's state of mind, Shiro knew that the opportunity was about to arrive. Just as the harvester leaned towards her in order to humiliate her more, Shiro's face became cold and serious as her aura changed from scared to bloodthirsty in a single moment. Leaping into action while the harvester wasn't expecting it, she activated her gauntlet as she jammed her arm inside the hole and released as much lightning as she could, paralyzing the harvester for a moment. Twisting her body, she reinforced her strength and slammed her shield against its arm, forcing it to release the spear. With her weapon retrieved and the harvester temporarily paralyzed, she knew that she had a short while in order to finish everything off. Stabbing the spear into the serpent head and pinning it against the ground, she switched her element and slammed the pommel of her spear with a piece of metal that forced both the spear and the serpent head into the ground and pinned it there securely. While that was happening, Shiro also jammed her right foot into the hole as she tried to tear it open with two opposing forces. With her arm going up and her foot going down, blood flowed out of the wound as it gradually increased in size. Of course, to avoid said blood, she activated her celestial armor along with her wind element so that a small layer of concentrated wind would push the blood aside. Should it somehow bypass that, the armor would then block it. Yura. Crying out in anger, the harvester tried to attack her with its remaining arm and black tongues that erupted out of its body. However, Shiro ignored this and slammed her palm against the harvester's chest. A pulse of cold mist exploded out, leaving a layer of ice over its body. Snapping her finger, the ice formed chains that connected to the walls of this room, forcing his movements to a halt. With the black tongues and its remaining arm frozen in their movements, the harvester no longer had anything to attack Shiro with since its main weapon was trying to infect its opponent with its blood and infecting mist. Since Shiro had stopped his main weapon from working due to her preparations, it had actually been fighting at a disadvantage for a while now, but the joy of forcing into despair made him overlook this fact. Unfortunately for the harvester, it was now too late to realize his mistakes. With a perfect opportunity to end this all in front of her, Shiro didn't mind using all of her energy in a single moment. Activating her star and void star celestial raiment, she gathered energy within her palms as a glowing orb was formed inside the harvester's body. The burning power of a star and the consuming nature of the void star combined together as Shiro quickly made some distance with the harvester. Snapping her fingers once more, a pulse of energy was released from the orb as it had even managed to push her back by a few steps. Suddenly, a giant suction force could be felt from the orb, ripping parts of the harvester's flesh off, consuming it and turning it into ash. As the harvester was slowly being eaten away by this orb, Shiro tried to leave the room, but the force was a little too powerful even for her since she had used quite a bit of energy and there wasn't enough to reinforce her body, nor was there enough to teleport out of the place. Gritting her teeth, she stabbed the spear into the ground and used it as a staff to slowly get away from the room. Glancing back a few times, she could see the harvester collapsing within itself as the serpent no longer had any life in its eyes. Wanting to make sure that it didn't come back alive, she waited until the orb completely erased the harvester before deactivating. Once she deactivated it, her mind seemed to relax. Collapsing against the floor, her consciousness seemed to fluctuate for a moment as fatigue hit her like a bullet train. The last thing she saw was the cold, dead walls of this nest before falling into darkness. Quest complete. After Shiro killed the true harvester, the giant worm, like being outside of the nest, froze up for a moment before collapsing into a puddle of flesh and blood. Did Shiro succeed? Kuromi muttered to herself as she quickly made some distance between her and the corpse since she didn't want to be hit by the blood. Looking around her, she couldn't help but frown as the casualties that they had sustained in this battle. Only 14 of us left, huh? She thought to herself with a sigh. During the fight, whenever one of the guards were pierced by the black tongues or slashed on by the black blood, they would either transform into one of the monsters they had encountered or have large portions of their body melt into a puddle of blood. Shaking her head, she quickly regrouped everyone and had them collect the corpses of their dead companions. Even though we were prepared, having this many of us go is still quite a shock. Philip chuckled sadly. Indeed. Help everyone out here since you're their leader. I'll go look for Shiro since she's still in the nest. Of course, young miss. Do you want one of us to come with you just in case? Philip asked. It's okay. Just have everyone recuperate for now. Kuromi shook her head before making her way towards the nest. Climbing through the same entrance that Shiro entered, she was immediately assaulted by the rotting smell, which almost made her faint. Jesus F*** King Christ, what the hell is this smell? She cursed to herself before continuing deeper into the nest. After walking for a while, she was shocked to see Shiro collapsed onto the floor with her clothes in tatters. Shiro! Kuromi cried out in shock as she quickly ran over to the unconscious Shiro. Turning her over, Kuromi could see that Shiro's face was a little pale with black blood all over her face and body, causing her heart to shake with fear. Quickly carrying Shiro on her back, Kuromi dashed out of the nest. ####. MN. Furrowing her brows, Shiro slowly opened her eyes and looked around her. Where am I? She muttered before sitting up. Seeing as though she was in a room, she knew that she must have been carried out of the nest since it was the last thing that she could remember. Massaging her head, she looked to her side and saw the door, which seemed to be unlocked. Sighing softly, she glanced towards the system interface and was rather surprised at what she saw. Calculating final score. Error. Undergoing maintenance. Please stand by. Raising her eyebrow at the strange notification, Shiro sighed before getting out of her bed. Realizing that she was in a different outfit entirely, she knew that someone must have changed her for her. It better be Kuromi or else. She muttered since she didn't like people seeing her bare unless it's Kuromi since she's her sister. *clack. Hearing the door handle move, Shiro looked up and saw Kuromi standing at the doorway. Oh my F*** King God, you're awake. Kuromi sighed in relief. Damn, do you know how worrying it was to watch you when you're unconscious? I don't have access to the system, so I can't even see if you're alive or not. Plus, it doesn't seem like the trial has ended yet, so I don't even know what's happening anymore, she said while shaking her head. How many days was I unconscious for, and what happened after I killed the real harvester? Shiro asked curiously. Well, after the one on the outside suddenly collapsed, I went inside the nest to find you. But when I went in, I saw you unconscious in one of the hallways with your face pale and your clothes tattered, so I brought you out. I didn't see what was inside since I wasn't too bothered. After I got you out, I had the guards regroup further away from the capital and brought you back to Yuru. It's a little hectic right now since the royal family and the entirety of the capital has been wiped out, so every family is at each other's necks right now to determine who's the next ruler. As for how many days you've been unconscious, let's just say it's been 4 days and I had to force feed you in order to keep you alive. Kuromi explained. I see. Wait a minute. You've been force-feeding me. Shiro raised her eyebrows. Yeah, never thought I'll be looking after a child of sorts. A grown-up and unconscious child whose survival was undetermined. Kuromi chuckled as Shiro became a little embarrassed. Anyways, how are the guards? Shiro asked. Hearing about the guards, Kuromi fell silent for a moment before sighed. Only 14 of them are left. Within the few that died, Nui and Prim were part of that. I know that you hung out with them quite a bit, so I thought that I might as well tell you. Kuromi replied. I see. Despite this all being a trial, it still gets quite depressing, huh? Shiro replied after a short moment to digest the information. MN. Setting that aside for now, what's going on with the trial? Did you not complete it? Why is everything still continuing as if this wasn't a trial? Kuromi asked with confusion. About that, apparently, there was an error in calculating the final score, and it's undergoing maintenance. Shiro replied. Huh? Undergoing maintenance? Kuromi raised her eyebrows. Yeah, it's quite strange for me to see that as well. Though I suppose the only thing we can do is to wait for it to finish maintenance for now, I suppose. What do you suppose we should do within this time? Shiro asked. Well, I suppose what we can do is to help out those affected by the larger families fighting for dominance. After all, with this country not having a ruler, it has become a brutal place where it is literally a fight or die moment. For those that don't have large families to back them, they're out in the world alone without support. So I suggest we help them out and give them a banner to come under for safety. It's not like we have anything else to do after all. Kuromi suggested as Shiro nodded. Sure, if you need anyone to be a show of force, I can be that person. I'm not really into doing anything political. Shiro replied. Oh, don't worry about that. Just think of it as Big Sis indulging herself for a bit while we have some time to ourselves. Kuromi chuckled. Following along with her plan, Kuromi continued to unite those without a family for the next 2 weeks, as they became one of the major powers contending for the ruler title within a short moment of time. Families that wanted to forcefully deal with Kuromi were dealt with by Shiro, as those involved would be wiped out, earning themselves the nickname of Demon Sisters by their enemies and Guardian Angels by their allies. The two passed their time in the trial without any knowledge of when they'll be let out. However, their journey to being rulers were cut short as the maintenance finally finished. Trial complete. Grade S. Difficulty: Celestial God. Side quest completion: A. Hidden quest completion: SS. Main quest completion: S. Guard affinity: S. Additional quest result: SS. S rank rewards: S rank Celestial Catalyst, Ascended Celestial Mana Essence, Supreme Celestial Awakening Stone, Soul Sword Upgrade, Soulbound Armor Upgrade, Soul Repair. Additional rewards: Celestial Empress Royal Decree, Celestial Empress Inheritance. Tilting her head at the rewards, she couldn't help but feel as though she was forgetting something as she quickly looked over her records in her database. To class up, I needed a B rank Celestial Catalyst, a Celestial Awakening Stone, and a Celestial Empress Decree. I've already collected one Celestial Mana Essence before coming here, so I didn't even need to ask the Empress for this item. She thought to herself as she massaged her eyes, since she could have asked a different question. Shaking her head, she couldn't help but glance at the final S-ranked reward. While it was noted as reward, Shiro couldn't help but feel a bad feeling rise up in her heart. Soul Repair? It was quite straightforward in terms of understanding what it does. However, considering their situation, it could mean something entirely different. Glancing over at Kuromi, Shiro could see her figure flicker for a few moments as dread filled her mind. This can't be happening. Quickly running over to hug Kuromi so that she didn't fall, Shiro set her down on the bed. Looking at Kuromi's face, she could see that her expression would flicker to being lifeless for a short amount of time before returning. Say, Shiro, what do you think is happening? Kuromi asked slowly. Gritting her teeth, Shiro stayed silent. System, I don't want this reward. If my grade is S, don't you dare take my sister. Shiro shouted out in her mind as rage filled her heart. She finally had someone she could truly call a family in this world, and yet the system wanted to take her away in the name of reward and fixing her soul? She didn't need that if it meant losing someone like Kuromi. ***, don't make that face. Kuromi sighed with a small smile. She could already guess what was happening since it was something she predicted a while back. A solo trial where she would also follow was strange to begin with. When the soul strands proved that they were incomplete made things all the more obvious, since she was, in a way, damaging Shiro's soul by not being one with her. It was quite clear at the start, so she had been taking the time to write down everything she knew in all of her notebooks so that Shiro could understand what she had gone through, along with tips on being a mage. But big sis. Shiro frowned. It's okay. I've known that this would happen for a while now. Kuromi shook her head. Balling her hands into a fist, Shiro thought about what she could do. System. Oi system. Reject this reward right now. I don't need it. She shouted out once more in hopes of getting a response, but nothing had happened. Shiro, I've enjoyed staying with you during our time in the trial. While it may have been short, it was also sweet. I just wish I could have spent more time with you along with my family in the real world. Kiyomi and Keiko are both lonely girls that were neglected due to my talent, so I tried my best to be with them. But now that I'm gone, the family must be pressuring the two of them quite a bit. Their good points are dimmed down as a task they should have done, while their mistakes are enlarged for everyone to scrutinize at. I know I said this before, but please look after them. Kuromi smiled sadly as Shiro could only nod. With the system not responding to her calls, she couldn't help but feel a little useless right now. She felt as though she couldn't do anything. Just as she was about to speak, a head-splitting pain assaulted her mind as her body twitched in agony. Feeling memories flood into her mind, she knew that this was what Kuromi had experienced. Quickly looking up, she was greeted with an empty bed. Silence. With Kuromi's memories flooding her mind, she could feel her emotions during the short time that they were together. Feeling a sense of familial love and care behind each memory, Shiro couldn't help but plant her face against the bed covers as tears started to fall. Quiet sobs could be heard as Shiro had never felt this helpless apart from the time in the labs. The only thing that has changed was that she now had power and was more mature, but the helpless feeling was the same. As the rewards have been distributed, entity, Shiro, will now be sent out of the trial and undergo class up. Seeing the notification, killing intent surged out of Shiro's body as her bloodshot eyes glared at the system with hatred and anger. Gritting her teeth, a desire to completely destroy the system appeared in her mind. However, for her to save everyone else that she cared about in the coming age of demons and gods, she had no choice but to use the system in order to protect everyone. Staying silent, her face became cold and emotionless while she waited for her to be brought back to the real world. Why do you do this to me, system? Is it fun? Why do you present to me the feeling of a caring big sister only to take it away from me after all this time? What did you have to gain from this? Was it a whim? If that's the case, why did she come with me to begin with? You should have just let me do everything alone. Seeing the system not respond to her questions once more, Shiro closed her eyes. Of course you won't answer. Out of the billions of people that use you, I'm just one in the crowd. Who cares about the ant you accidentally step on when you walk? You don't even notice them. All that happens is your shoe crushes them to bits without a care of their family or connects. A cold killer. That is you. Whoever created you doesn't notice everyone. You're like that shoe which kills without a second thought. All that you do is carry out your orders. If he walks, you walk. If he stops, you stop. Sighing softly, Shiro was hit by the reality that she was still one of the crowd. There could be hundreds, if not thousands of people around the world right now that are more talented or powerful than she was. If she failed to prove herself like in the labs, she would just be a star that shined slightly brighter. There is no free food in this world. If you desire something, take it by your own hands. Don't rely on the system as it is, but another carnivorous being who watches as you hunt for it. The treasures are tempting, but the price of treasures are life-threatening. Use the system, but don't rely on it. Make everything you learned yours. Memorize the construction of spells by yourself and not through a system skill. The system is but a proxy, stopping you from achieving true power. If the system was to disappear, so will the spells, but not the experience. Falling into a small slumber of sorts, her body started to change ever so slightly with the addition of her soul being fixed. Her reservoir of celestial energy started to connect to her mana pool as the two started to merge together. Her links, that were previously shattered, are now sewn together by her soul strands which fixed the cracks and repaired her links back to pristine condition. ####. Outside in the real world, a pillar of light shot up into the sky as the gateway started to close. Understanding that this phenomenon was clearly irregular and that people who were still undergoing their trial were forcefully ejected out, the adventurers quickly called upon the authorities to check on this situation. Looking at the pillar of light, they realized that it was no normal pillar of light. It was in fact a giant stack of magic circles that when layered together, formed the illusion of a pillar. There were a few mages that took this chance to analyze the situation, but couldn't translate any of the runes much to their confusion. However, the spirits around the place were jubilant. While they hadn't fully developed sentience, they knew that this was an event to be joyful about. Their queen had now returned, and now she's gone a step above to become an empress. As the empress gets stronger, so will the spirits. For those in the spirit country hidden in the world, they could clearly feel their strength shoot up, as those who were stuck in the higher levels were given 10 levels for free. How could this be? 10 levels at once? Not even the previous queens were able to cause this kind of phenomenon. A spirit muttered as she stood up in her room. Since they had actually leveled up by 10 levels in one go, this must mean that their queen must have just experienced an upgrade. For a change such as this, the signs of evolutions cannot be easily hidden away, so they must take this chance to locate the queen. Quickly, send our scouts out into the world. Look for our queen and bring her to safety. The world is dangerous, and we cannot let her wander the world alone. While this was all happening, Shiro was undergoing her class up. Class upgrade. Mystic Sylph Queen, SSS. True Celestial Sylph Empress, EX.
Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe.